Hello friends, good morning and welcome to the IDSAT network. Our topic of discussion is part of our ongoing series on film appreciation, and the specific topic for today is Neorealism in Indian cinema. Today friends shall be part 1 of it. We shall be continuing it in our succeeding lecture as well. So, I'd like to introduce our subject expert who is here with us today, Dr. Manoj Sharma, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Kirodimal College, University of Delhi. With this very brief introduction, I'd like to welcome Sir to our studio. Sir, thank you for coming.
Thank you. A very good morning to all the viewers. The topic for today is Neorealism in Indian cinema. Neorealism basically was a movement in Italian films in 1950s and 1940s and early 1950s. And Neorealism basically dealt with a number of issues which were pertaining to poverty and the other socio-economic issues which were related to the common masses. The way Neorealist films they were being made, they were in a way reaction to the white telephone films which were made earlier. White telephone films which were made in Italy were those films which were very extravagant in nature, which were dealing with fantasy. And Neorealism was some sort of a break from those kind of films on which this kind of fantasy, this kind of extravagance which was shown in those kind of films where characters they were talking on the white telephones. And this kind of cinema, a lot of focus was by the shooting was being done by taking non-professional actors, and these non-professional actors sometimes professionals they were being also taken, but at the same time these kind of professionals they were not being typecast in certain roles. And at the same time a lot of location shooting was also being done. The people those who were delving in this kind of cinema, some of the Italian Neorealist filmmakers like Roberto Rossellini, De Sica, Visconti, all these people, all these film directors and filmmakers, they wanted to project a certain kind of reality which was termed as Neorealism. Realism as a movement, it emerged in 19th century, and the aim of realism was to keep some kind of connections with reality, to show the things as they were. And Neorealist cinema's attempt was also to do this kind of thing in the field of cinema. What we see is that all these filmmakers, those who were making all these kind of films in 1940s and early 50s, they were against some sort of a fascist projection. Italy was under the fascist rule at that time, and this kind of cinema was basically against the fascist projection of fantasy, the fascist projection that Italy was a very happy state at that particular point of time. So they wanted to project an image where they wanted to say that Italy was not happy as the fascists they were trying to project it was, and at the same time the problems of poverty, unemployment, the socio-economic problems in various spheres, for example unhappy marriages, all these kind of things they were quite rampant in the Italian society. And all these kind of films like Roma Città Aperta, Rome Open City, Ladri di Bicicletta, Bicycle Thief, and La Terra Trema, The Earth Trembles, and these were the important films of the Neorealist period or the Neorealist filmmakers. One of the important films which is considered to be the Neorealist forerunner was Ossessione or Obsession. In this particular film which was made in 1942-43, what we see is that this image of Italy, in which it was shown that Italy was a very happy kind of a place, was rejected, and the people those who were associated with this film, they wanted to project a different kind of reality. So what we particularly see in this particular period is that Neorealism was first applied, as you can see on the screen as well, Antonio Pietrangeli to Luciano Visconti's film Ossessione, and this film which was made by him, the style was associated with Neorealism, and it is considered to be the forerunner, some sort of a forerunner to the films which were made in the later times. For example, Rome Open City, Shoe Shine, Paisa, Bicycle Thieves, and The Earth Trembles, by these important filmmakers, those who were associated with this kind of cinema. What we see is that the kind of themes which were very important in this neorealist cinema were that a lot of poverty with which Italy was afflicted during that particular period, during the fascist rule, that was being shown. The socio-economic backwardness of Italy was also reflected in this kind of cinema, as we can see. And at the same time, the struggle which could be seen for sustenance could also be witnessed for this particular period. So that kind of economic oppression which was part of Italy during this particular period could be seen. The kind of inspiration which was particularly taken during this particular period was from Giovanni Verga. Giovanni Verga was a writer, and he provided some sort of a narrative prototype for an alternative to the cliche and falsehoods of fascist film industry, and the kind of writings with which he was associated was known as Verismo. And he was a follower of the realist traditions in the Italian art, which was focusing on the people, those who had earlier not received the focus of filmmakers. And the Veris means the people, those who wanted to keep themselves to the truth or the reality. They were being criticized that they were showing a very simplified vision of the world, and these people, it was being suggested that they were showing a very simplified vision, and this was showing some sort of an unfavorable image of Italy. So what we see is that various theoreticians during this particular period, they were associated in terms of defining neorealism, and for them, for different people, those who were associated with the theorization of neorealism, they tried to define neorealism through various definitions, through various characteristics with which they wanted to, or they tried to associate neorealism. One of them was Georges Sadoul, and he says that neorealism was a school, and he talked about 5 characteristics of neorealism, as you can see on the screen as well, that it was associated with some sort of a geographic and temporal boundaries. They were clearly defined or pointed out, and there were some sort of group of masters and disciples, that they were people, those who were craftsmen in neorealist filmmaking, and the people, those who were trying to learn from the neorealist filmmakers, and some sort of rules, some set of rules in the context that they identified that various rules which were associated with the neorealist aesthetic, they were also there. And what we see is that non-professional actors, they were being used in neorealist cinema. These people, those who were not professionally engaged with the film industry or the entertainment industry, they were being taken in the neorealist films, and because they were not typecast in certain roles as the other people, those who were associated with the film industry, they were being typecast in particular roles. The issue of typecasting could be understood in the sense that when we see films, what we see is that whenever popular film stars, they are enacting certain roles, we don't identify with their characters, rather we see those film stars as film stars. So that is some sort of a typecasting. And on the other hand, the people or the actors, those who are working in a certain film, and when we watch that particular film, we are able to see that that particular film star is not a film star, rather he is a certain character. And that is why the people, those who are performing such kind of roles, they are said to be real actors and not to be stars. So this is the kind of distinction between the stars and the actors. For example, some of the good film actors like Irfan Khan in the recent Indian films, how they are able to mold themselves in the films, how the kind of films in which they are working. The kind of location shooting was another important determinant, that the people, those who were associated with the neorealist cinema, they were going to the locations, and then they were shooting their films on the locations. And at the same time, there is a lot of respect for the continuity of time and space. Continuity of time and space, at the same time lengthy takes, natural lighting, unobtrusive editing, and predominance of medium and long shots. So what we see is that in the neorealist cinema, all these kind of features which we have enumerated, they have been considered as some sort of rules with which Neorealist films they were being associated. We have already discussed the issue of non-professional cast and the location shooting, that how the people, those who were associated with Neorealist cinema, they went to the locations, and they wanted that they should not shoot on the constructed sets, rather they should work on the locations, and when they were working on the locations, then they will be able to capture the reality of those locations, and at the same time a lot of respect for the continuity of time and space. When they were filming the kind of films which they were making, they had a lot of respect for the continuity of time and space, that they should not jump the time, they should not jump the space, and some kind of continuity should be maintained, so that the idea of verismo, or the idea of truth which they wanted to project on the screen could be maintained. At the same time, lengthy takes were there. A lot of focus was on this idea when you will have some sort of a long shot. So the audience as well as the filmmaker is going to see the character on the screen. So no one is seeing the character beforehand. Both the audience and the filmmaker, as he wants to project the character on the screen, will see the character simultaneously, so that this kind of truth or this kind of reality will be seen in that character. Natural lighting means that they wanted to reject any kind of artificial lights. It does not mean that Neorealist filmmakers, they did not employ any kind of artificial lights. They also employed artificial lights as well. They also shot their films on sets as well. But the kind of image which they created on the screen was that of reality which we could see. Unobtrusive editing means that a lot of focus was not on editing. The camera rolled on, and camera, when it rolled on, it wanted to capture the reality in a particular manner, and that is why we find that the kind of photography which was associated with the Neorealist cinema was some sort of a greyish photography in nature. Greyish photography in the sense that a lot of documentary kind of filmmaking was associated in the Neorealist cinema. Documentary movement was started by John Grierson in Britain in 1920s and 30s, and it is generally considered that the documentary, the footage or the documentary style of filmmaking tries to project a lot of reality. And at the same time, what we see is that there is a lot of predominance of medium and long shots, and when a lot of predominance of medium and long shots is there, then the focus of the camera is on the character in such a way that the character is not focused instantly, rather the kind of background in which the character is there, that is also focused in these kind of cinema. At the same time, some other rules which were associated with Neorealism were that use of contemporary true to life subjects, in the sense that the people, those who were contemporary in nature, the ideas which are contemporary in nature, they were being used in this kind of films. Active viewer involvement, working class protagonist, dialogue in the vernacular, and undevised open-ended plot implied social criticism. So what we see is that all these kind of ideas, they were associated with Neorealist cinema. When we say that active viewer involvement, we mean that the viewer is actively involved in the film. It does not mean that viewer is passive in nature, and viewer is able to identify with the characters as well, because the characters are from a milieu with which the masses are able to identify. The protagonists are from the working classes, and these kind of protagonists, those who are working in different sectors with which a lot of audience was also associated. So they were able to identify with the characters, as we can see in a film called Bicycle Thief, which was made by DCK, which is considered to be one of the masterpieces of the Neorealist cinema. And dialogue in the vernacular means that the people, those who were watching films, they were able to identify with the language of the film. The films were in the vernacular, in the sense that the people, those who were able to understand that kind of language, the film was made in that particular kind of language. So that people will have more connection with the film. Open-ended plot means that the film will end on such a note that it can go to different directions, and it was up to the audience to decide where the film will go. As we can see in the parallel cinema which was made in India in Hindi films in 1960s, 70s as well, that many of the films, they were open-ended in nature, and it was up to the audience to decide that what kind of ending they wanted to visualize. So these were some of the features which were associated with the Neorealist films. And when we say the implied social criticism, it means that a lot of criticism in the social sense was also associated with the Neorealist cinema, because the Neorealist cinema wanted to project reality in a particular way, and the people, those who were associated with the Neorealist cinema, they knew that a lot of problems in the society, they were existed, and the filmmakers, they were not giving a lot of time and effort to those kind of problems. So they were in a way criticizing those kind of social problems with which society was afflicted. And Neorealist filmmakers, they never formed a formal group, because there are certain people, those who see that Neorealism was a movement, and as a movement, a number of filmmakers, they came together, and then they decided to make Neorealist films. But there are others who reject this kind of idea, and they say that Neorealism was not a movement, and the filmmakers, they did not sit on a table and then they decided that they will make such kind of films. Rather, this kind of consciousness which came to them, it was at a very different level, and it was at an individual level. And that is why when this kind of consciousness came at an individual level, they were able to project their own versions of reality. And that is why we see that the films which were made by Rossellini, De Sica and Visconti, they had their own versions of reality. And in one of the interviews, Roberto Rossellini, he also admitted that all filmmakers, those who were associated with Neorealist films, they had their own versions, because everyone had their own versions of morality and own versions of truth. And truth was not unidimensional, but rather multidimensional in nature. The way it was being approached by different filmmakers was reflected in the films which were being made by them. And when you try to apply all these kind of rules together in all the films which were made by Neorealist filmmakers, then that was not possible, because not many films will be able to fulfill all these kind of rules which could have been applied. So there was some sort of a broad divergence by the Italian filmmakers. They'll have some kind of divergence on the some kind of convergence rather, some kind of convergence by some Italian filmmakers, and they'll have certain characteristics which they will propose as some sort of a norm, and this is how they will try to tackle the cinema. And what we see is that with regard to filmmakers, they were not only concerned with the kind of ideas which were given by Giovanni Verga, they went beyond them, because they believed that the ideas which were being put forward by Giovanni Verga, they needed some kind of changes, and they came up with those kind of changes, because the kind of ideas which were given by Verga, they were more associated with the kind of reality which was there, with the way it existed. And the filmmakers, they wanted that they should not only focus on the reality, rather they should also focus on changing the reality. They should, some kind of affirmative action should come so that the reality could be changed. And Verga, he acknowledges that there is some sort of a disparity between the way things are and the way they should be. And the Neorealist filmmakers, they also insist on ending this kind of disparity. And Sandro Petralia, he argues that we have to change the things from the way they are to the way they could be and they should be. So this is the kind of ideas which are reflected in the films which have been made by the filmmakers, and the kind of ideas which were given by Giovanni Verga, they were being modified by these filmmakers. Verga talks about essere, which was to be. Essere in Italian means to be, and dovere, to have to. And Petralia, he adds potere. Potere means to be able to. And this is the most important aspect, that the filmmaker is able to change that kind of reality, that there is some sort of contest between the way things are and the way the things they ought to be. And this could be reconciled by some sort of a suitable social action. The filmmakers has to take some kind of a social action. He has to be some sort of a proactive individual, and this kind of difference between the status quo and the inherent potential of social change has to be bridged. So this is what the Neorealist filmmakers, they wanted also, and this kind of change which could come in the Italian society could only come when the filmmakers, they will understand the kind of task which they have. They will not be the silent spectators or mute spectators in the way the things they are being projected on the screen. Rather, they will become some sort of a positive agency to bring that kind of change, in which their own applications, their own ideas, they will come on the screen, and they will try to bring about a change in the society. So what we see is that Neorealism, it sought to reclaim and reappropriate cinema and to revamp trust in medium's ability to demonstrate reality as it is. And that is why filmmakers, the Neorealist filmmakers, they show an anti-establishment posture, and they depicted an image of Italy that was not reassuring to Italian officialdom, and that is why Neorealists, they were being denounced for slandering Italy abroad. So what we see is that the Neorealist filmmakers, those who were trying to project the reality of Italy in a very different manner, they were being criticized. They were being criticized by the officials, and these officials, they had a particular project in their mind in which they had to project a very positive kind of image of Italy, and they did not want that these kind of filmmakers, they should project an image of Italy in which Italy is shown in a very bad light. If we try to compare this kind of situation in the context that when Satyajit Ray made his film called Pather Panchali, and he was also criticized by certain people that he was trying to sell Indian poverty to the Western audience, and that is why he became popular as well. But the question is whether that kind of reality exists or it did not exist. So when we will realize that Satyajit Ray was trying to project a kind of reality which was there in the Indian villages, and this kind of reality was seen by him, this kind of reality was felt by him, and that is how he tried to project that particular kind of reality. Though he was criticized by some of the critics for this kind of image of India which was being exhibited abroad to gain any kind of popularity, but there were others, those who rescued Satyajit Ray, and they said that the idea of Satyajit Ray was not to show the Indian poverty in any way, but rather to show the kind of life which was there in the Indian villages, and that was shown in a very lyrical way, or lyrical quality of the film was quite applauded, and it was quite well received not only in India but in other parts of the world as well. Cesare Zavattini, he was a script writer who was associated with the Neorealist cinema, and I would like to quote him, as you can see on the screen as well. "The cinema should accept unconditionally what is contemporary. It must tell reality as if it were a story. Excavate in the illimitable mine of reality, the cinema will become socially important. If he use living real characters with which to sound reality, his motion becomes more effective, morally stronger, more useful. He wants to meet the real protagonist of everyday life." So what we see is that whatever has been talked about by Zavattini, his focus is on contemporary issues. He says that reality will be able to be reflected when we are talking about the contemporary issues, and we have to tell reality in such a way that it appears to be a story. And in the various films which were made by the various Italian filmmakers, the Neorealist films, they were trying to project that kind of reality on the screen. And this kind of reality also had some kind of moral aspect which was associated with it. We see that in many of the films the issue of morality was quite important, and they wanted to de-glamorize the film. Film was not to be some sort of a glamorous venture, rather film was to be some sort of a purposeful and socially useful document, and their purpose was to project the characters or the protagonist of the film, that these characters are the characters of the everyday life. And when these characters are characters of the everyday life, then people, they will be able to associate themselves with these kind of characters. As I talked about a film called Ladri Di Bicicleta, I mentioned this film, and the character, the protagonist of the film is basically someone who is sticking posters on the walls in the city. So this character, how his bicycle is being stolen in the film, and how he is trying to find the bicycle in the entire film. He is running around. His son is some sort of a moral eye for the character in the film. What we see is that when the protagonist of the film is not able to find his own bicycle, in the climax of the film, he tries to steal someone else's bicycle. So that kind of situation in which the protagonist is being forced to commit such kind of an act where he has to steal the bicycle of another person, and this kind of reality becomes more poignant when this kind of an act is viewed by the son. The character, when this kind of idea comes to his mind that he is going to steal the bicycle, he asks his son to go away from that particular place, but the son comes back, and the son forms the moral eye to the character. So this kind of poignancy, this kind of pain of the central character is exaggerated or accentuated when that incident is being witnessed by the son. And when you see a similar kind of arrangement or similar kind of resonance in a film called Do Biga Zameen, which was made by Bimal Roy, in which the father and the son duo, they come to the city so that they can earn a lot of money, so that their Do Biga Zameen, or the 2 acres of land which they have in their own village and which has been mortgaged to someone, that could be retrieved. And here, how the father and son, how they view the city and how they are living a life in which there is a lot of struggle. So some kind of resonances could be found, and Bimal Roy, he also accepted that when he saw Bicycle Thieves during the first International Film Festival which was held in India in 1952, he was moved by this kind of cinema. Though Do Biga Zameen was based on a story which was written by Salil Chaudhary with the title of Rikshawala. But this kind of projection, this kind of some kind of resonances, some kind of similarity in terms of images of both these films could be seen. Satyajit Ray was also quite influenced when he saw this film, and he later admitted in his life also that he was quite influenced by watching Bicycle Thief, and he also wanted to make that kind of cinema which was quite meaningful and purposeful, and which is some sort of a cinema which is de-glamorized in nature. There is another film theoretician called Marcia Landy, who is associated with films and in a way the criticism of films, and she says that Neorealism or the Neorealist films, they provided direct access to the images by means of long take photography and minimal editing, and through middle distance shots that could enable viewer to assimilate characters' specific relationship to environment. So what we see is that there is a direct access to the images by means of long takes of the photography. When you are taking a long take, when you are giving the kind of time to the character, then you will be able to project a reality in a particular way. And editing was minimal in nature. A lot of focus on editing was not there in the Neorealist films, and the shots which were there, which were middle distance shots, the character as well as the relationship of the character to the environment, that was emphasized upon. And when all these kind of films which were neorealist in nature, they were being made, it was not liked by the people, those who were associated with the government or the state. And when the government, it saw that some sort of a image of Italy which was trying to slander Italy abroad, which was being shown by the filmmakers, those who were the neorealist filmmakers. So the state retaliated in the form of censorship. As censorship is one of the instruments with which state could decide the kind of films which could be made, or they could also go to the extent of pre-censorship of certain films by in a way scrutinizing the film scripts. And what we see is that Giulio Andreotti law in 1949 it came, and it had, as you can see on the screen as well, that there were certain provisions to check films which were portraying Italy in an unfavorable light. The introduction of pre-censorship could also be seen, and at the same time, so that they can get some kind of a control over the film industry. And films scripts, they were being submitted to a ministerial commission, and at the same time it was decided that the production loans, they will be given to certain filmmakers only, and they will be given after the official acceptance. And film could also be refused an export license on the pretext that it slandered Italy. So what we see is that state was in a way was not happy with the kind of neorealist films which were being made, and state, it had all that kind of authority where if they will exercise that authority, then they will be able to muzzle the kind of voice which the neorealist filmmakers they had. So they will not be able to project that kind of image if the state will exercise their authority. And in this context, what state did was that pre-censorship of certain scripts, that was being done. And at the same time, they were not allowing that loans could be given to the films which were trying to slander Italy abroad. And at the same time, if they will not give export licenses to the Italian films, then these films, they will not be exhibited abroad. So the foreign earnings of these films will not take place. So filmmaking, as we all know, is a costly venture. A lot of money is being invested in making films, and the filmmakers, those who were making these films, they wanted that others should watch these films, and when others will watch these films, then only they will be able to realize the kind of investments which went into making these kind of films. So when export licenses will not be given, then these kind of films will not go abroad, and they will not be able to earn that kind of money. So the filmmakers, they will be at some sort of a disadvantage in this context. So what is being done by Andreotti was that he believed that neorealist films, they were being defaming Italy abroad, and it was portraying Italy as a nation of social strife, unemployment and poverty. And what happens in February 1948 is that movement for defense of Italian cinema, it was being formed, and 10 eminent filmmakers, they denounced the Andreotti's law in a number of articles which were being published in Rinascita, which was a communist weekly, on March 3rd, 1949. So what was happening in Italy, that the filmmakers, those who were associated with the Communist Party as well, directly or indirectly, they came together, and how they wanted to fight the Italian government, that how Italian government which was not letting them to project the particular kind of image of Italy, and how they wanted to tackle the Italian government, how they wanted to make more more films which were dealing with neorealist aspects, that was also being done. And what we see in Germany also, Germany was a Nazi's state, and Hitler as well as Goebbels, who was the Minister of Propaganda, they also realized that cinema could be used for propaganda purposes, and they also used cinema for propaganda purposes, and some of the filmmakers also they employed so that they could make certain films which were projecting Germany in a very positive kind of light. And what Nazis did was that they established their own cinema institutions, and they brought cinema under the control of Ministry of Propaganda. And the propaganda motives and activities of Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, who was the Minister of Propaganda, they were clear, as they both were aware that films could mobilize minds, and films could also create powerful illusions, and they could also captivate audiences. So what we see is that in Germany, what was happening is that cinema that was being used by the state so that they are able to propagate the kind of ideology with which state was associated, and they also do it in a particular manner, that how one of the filmmakers called Leni Riefenstahl, who was also associated with Hitler in some way, and she made two films, two important films in the context that both these films they were in a way were trying to project the Nazi philosophy or the Nazi propaganda. And as you can see on the screen, Leni Riefenstahl on 20th May 1933, Goebbels, he stated that the German cinema, it had some kind of a duty that how it has to become some sort of a vanguard of Nazi military forces, and that is why these kind of films they were being made also. And there was a film called The Triumph of Will, which was made in 1935, and this film was some sort of a deification, some sort of a how Hitler, he was deified, he was considered as some sort of a deity in this particular kind of film, and it was also dealing with some sort of a monumental architecture which was associated with the Nazi philosophy. And Hitler was shown in Nuremberg Nazi party rally, where some sort of a rectangular tribune was built, and Hitler's image of a Führers, that was also emphasized in this film. And there was another film called Olympia, which was made, and it was also in a way trying to project a kind of image of Germany in which Nazism was in a way praised. So what we see this particular period, that both these films, which was The Triumph of Will as well as Olympia, which were made by a German filmmaker who was associated with Italy, was trying to project an image of which was a German filmmaker, sorry, and how it was trying to project an image of Germany in a very positive light, how the image of Hitler was being projected in a very particular way, so that they are able to garner as much as mass support as possible. And what we see is that when this kind of state repression was taking place, a number of filmmakers, they had to flee from Germany to other countries. And what happened was that when these kind of filmmakers they fled from Germany, some of the left-wing filmmakers as well as Jewish filmmakers, because what we see in Nazi Germany was that a lot of anti-Semitic and anti-communist propaganda was taking place. And when this anti-Semitic and anti-communist propaganda was taking place, then a number of artists, those who were associated with both these kind of communities, they had to flee from Germany. And when they had to flee from Germany, the countries to which they took refuge, they were in a way benefited in the sense that these kind of filmmakers, they were able to contribute to those kind of places where they migrated. And on the other hand, Germany had to lose in the context that the services of these talented filmmakers were now not available to Germany. So this kind of state repression in a way crippled the film industry in some way, that the filmmakers, they had to flee, and this kind of services of these filmmakers were not available to the film industry. And at the individual level, when we see that how these kind of filmmakers, those who had to flee Germany, how they were being in a way maltreated in Germany, or how this kind of fear and horror they had in their own minds that they had to flee from their own country. So, Nazi ideology in that context was trying to project an image of Germany in which Hitler as well as Germany was some sort of an Aryan race. They were superior to others, and the others, the people those who were not perfect, the people those who were not Aryans, they had to be exterminated. And in that context, the people those who were those who had some kind of physical impairment, the people those who were Jews, they were being exterminated by the Germans or the Nazis. And a number of concentration camps in different parts of Germany and other places, they were being established so that these people, they could be exterminated or in a very systematic kind of way. What we see is that the fascist cinema in Italy during 1922 to 43, that was the fascist period, was the cinema of propaganda. And this cinema was detached from reality, and it was aiming at promoting an excellent image of Italy. And I already told you that Neorealist films, they were a reaction against the white telephone films, which were very pretentious in nature, and in which characters they were talking on the white telephones. So, white shining telephones. So, what we see is that fascist cinema, which was considered to be some sort of a pretentious cinema, which was considered to be some sort of a cinema of propaganda, that was being rejected by the Neorealist filmmakers. And the fascist cinema, it was trying to project an image of Italy which was very positive in nature, where no problems existed. And on the other hand, Neorealist cinema was some sort of an antithesis to that kind of white telephone films cinema. So, what we see is that the origin of Neorealism in Italy is to the kind of discontent which the filmmakers felt, the way they were not able to express themselves, and when they were not being able to express themselves, this kind of discontent grew further, and this kind of discontent led to more films which were based on these kind of images. So, the Neorealism, it emerged against some sort of a cinema which was delving into fantasy, which was delving into imagination. So, it was some sort of a movement which was against the pre-war stylistics or the kind of fascist cinema which was there. So, Neorealist cinema wanted to project that kind of image of Italy which was quite meaningful in nature, which was not glamorized in a way, which was de-dramatized in a way, that a lot of dramatization which was associated with the popular films, that kind of dramatization was not there in the Neorealist cinema. They wanted to project reality in a way where a lot of dramatization was not there. At the same time, the melodramatic elements were, though they were there to a certain extent, but they were not all that there that which were there in the commercial filmmaking. So, a number of theorists, those who are associated with the Neorealist cinema, Andre Bazin was a film critic who is also known as a humanist film critic in that context. He was associated with a lot of writings which was associated with cinema. He has written 2 volumes of What is Cinema, and he is considered to be one of the finest critics on Italian Neorealism. And he tried to explain Neorealism in the context of the moral content. As you can see on the screen as well, he sees that the basic humanism of contemporary Italian films as their principal merit. In Bazin, he argues that meso-scene, how the scene is set up, is the essence of Neorealist film, and it is also associated with deep focus photography and the sequence shot, and how these devices, they permit audience to be more involved in watching this kind of film. And at the same time, what we see is that realism for Bazin is not so much a technique that one can exercise or an audience in viewer, but rather an attitude or a position that filmmaker adopts in relation to his subject matter. So, what is Bazin arguing is that the kind of moral content is more important to him, that, and this is how he talks about in the film called Bicycle Thieves, which I have already talked about, that how a child becomes the moral window to the universe, how the view of the child in the film is some sort of an indicator of the moral content of the film, and how child defines the entire moral content of the film, and it has been quite in a way discussed and debated by Bazin when he watched this kind of film. There were others apart from Bazin, those who are known as socio-historians, Umberto Barbero in Italy and Georges Sadoul in France. They are being considered as socio-historians in the context of Neorealism, and they postulate that Neorealism as an exclusive articulation of the war and the anti-fascist resistance with stress on social concern. So, what we see is that there are two kind of film theorists, those who are associated. One was André Bazin and others were the socio-historians in the form of Sadoul, and how they want to see Neorealism in a different way. Humanists in the context of the moral ideal which was there in the films, and socio-historians in the context of the kind of war situation which was prevailing in Italy at that particular point of time. And what we see is that the Neorealism, it declines in 1950s. In the second half of the 1950s, there is decline of Neorealism in Italy. So, Giulio Andreotti, who was the director of performing arts, he was given a lot of powers by the government, and state used the total political power and took advantage of the dependence of cinema on industrial structure and the financial exigencies to subdue the harshness and the survival of pre-war stylistic techniques. So, what we see is that in the decline of Neorealism, the role which was played by the state became quite important, because state had a lot of economic power. Apart from the political power which was with the state, a lot of economic power also rested with the state. As we have seen that state decided if they will not give any kind of permit to export these kind of films, then the filmmakers, they will lose on that kind of money which they could earn when they will exhibit their films in other parts of the world. So, this kind of financial problems with which Neorealist filmmakers they had to undergo also gave them some kind of authentic portrayal as well, because they did not have all that kind of money to splurge in terms of filmmaking. So, many a times the kind of shots which they took, they were one-time shots, or the first time shots they were being included, because they did not have all that raw footage with them, they did not have all that kind of money with them, and at the same time they did not have that kind of money to take the established film stars. So, non-professionals, those who could fit into the characters with which the kind of the films which were being made, they were being taken. So, this kind of taking of non-professional actors, they did not have money to make huge sets. So, they had to shoot their films on locations, on location shooting was taking place. So, all these kind of disadvantages in the context provided them all the kind of advantages in the context that their films became more realistic in nature, and they became some sort of harbingers of the Neorealist cinema which was made. And what we see when the decline of Neorealism was taking place, because of the financial exigencies, they did not have money in the later times to produce the film. These filmmakers, they could not produce initially. These kind of disadvantages became advantages to them, and when the kind of state control which was being exercised by the state, it became a disadvantage to them. And we see that there were other factors also apart from that, which was associated with the decline of Neorealism, and how Neorealism was associated with the Communist Party, and how the Italian Communist Party, which was associated with the decline with the Neorealist filmmakers, that was not liked by the Italian the government, which was not in favor of the communists, and they did not want to provide any kind of support to the Italian filmmakers, and they saw that if they will not provide this kind of support to the Communist Party as well, then they will be able to throttle the kind of aspirations which the Neorealist filmmakers they had. And what we see as the success of the Italian films in US, in United States of America, and the rising investment of American capital in the Italian film industry. It created all kinds of commercialized and corrupted imitations of Neorealism. So that was another important aspect which was associated with the decline of Neorealism. What we see is that a lot of American capital, it was invested in the Italian film industry, and when this kind of capital was invested in the Italian film industry, so certain corrupted and commercialized ways or forms of Neorealism they came, and when with that kind of money which was being given by the US film industry to the Italian film industry, these kind of poor imitations of Neorealism could be seen in the later half of 50s and 1960s. So that has also been criticized, that how the American capital destroyed Neorealism, but there are others who said that in this way Neorealism was in a way went to other direction, and the form of Neorealism changed because the contemporary political, social and economic reality changed, and when this kind of reality it changed, then we say that the filmmaking also had to change. So we will continue tomorrow with our discussion. Today I would like to end here with the decline of Neorealism, and we will talk about the other aspects tomorrow in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this very interesting presentation that we had on Neorealism in Indian cinema. And as sir said, he's going to take it up from here in our next lecture. So stay tuned in for that. So thanks again, friends. Keep watching us.